Over the weekend, President Trump made a move that stunned both legal scholars and state officials. He ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles under Title X, bypassing Governor Gavin Newsom's approval. This was done, according to the White House memo, to protect ICE and DHS officials during what Trump called a dangerous breakdown of law and order. It follows multiple clashes between protesters and immigration officers, including reports of injuries sustained by federal agents during a raid in East LA. But here's the twist. Governor Newsom explicitly rejected the need for federal troops. And now, California is suing the Trump administration, calling it an illegal federal occupation. With the military now placing 700 Marines on alert for potential escalation, the question isn't just whether Trump's actions are legal, but what kind of precedent this sets for presidential power in domestic crises. Let's break down what Title X allows, how it compares to the Insurrection Act, and why critics say Trump is walking the line of authoritarian overreach.
We've had some exciting days in the last week, I would say, mostly good. Some of the things you're reading about in Los Angeles, thank goodness we sent out some wonderful National Guard. They've really helped, and a lot of problems they were having out there. They were afraid to do anything, and we sent out the troops, and they've done a fantastic job. So I want to thank them very much.
Trump's presidential memo, signed late Friday, authorizes the federalization of National Guard troops under Title X, U.S.C. Section 12406. That means the troops now answer directly to the president, not to Governor Newsom or the California National Guard. In his memo, Trump states, "In light of these incidents and credible threats of continued violence, I hereby call into federal service members and units of the National Guard under 10 U.S.C. 12406. The stated mission? To protect federal buildings, officers, and infrastructure in greater Los Angeles, but not to engage directly with civilians. The Pentagon says the Guard will provide logistical and perimeter support only, with no policing authority." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, Trump's pick after firing Lloyd Austin, was given full authority to extend the deployment beyond 60 days as needed. But what's striking here is how vague the justification is. Trump claimed on Truth Social, Governor Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass should apologize to the people of Los Angeles for the absolutely horrible job that they have done. And this now includes the ongoing LA riots. So far, neither LAPD nor the California National Guard has reported anything resembling that scale of violence. That's why legal experts are raising red flags.
Let's give it to Gavin Newsom so he can waste it in Los Angeles. No, we don't want to do that, but we're giving you across the board raise for every single service member in the U.S. Armed Forces. We're giving you across the board, and you deserve it.
Title X of the U.S. Code governs how the U.S. military operates under federal control. Section 12406 allows the president to call National Guard units into active duty if there's an insurrection, an invasion, or an inability to enforce federal law. But those are very high bars, and there's usually a key condition. States must be unable or unwilling to act. According to Jessica Levinson, law professor at Loyola Law School, Title X allows the president to provide backup to federal operations, but historically, this has involved some level of state cooperation. What we're seeing now is a president unilaterally overriding a state's leadership, and that's dangerous. But so far, the events in LA have been limited to non-lethal protests, scattered clashes, and a few injuries during ICE-led raids, not full-scale riots. Governor Newsom responded with a sharp rebuke. Let's get this straight. 1. Local law enforcement didn't need help. 2. Trump sent troops anyway to manufacture chaos and violence. 3. Trump succeeded. 4. Now things are destabilized, and we need to send in more law enforcement just to clean up Trump's mess.
Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk.
This is where the legal questions get murky. Title 10 does give the president emergency powers, but those powers are not absolute. Professor Levinson notes, this is not the Insurrection Act. The National Guard under Title 10 can't detain people, can't enforce curfews, and can't act like police. So the question becomes, why deploy them at all? Experts worry that Trump is exploiting a legal loophole, deploying military forces not to enforce law, but to create a political narrative of crisis and federal control. California's lawsuit argues that Trump failed to meet the legal threshold for federalization, that there's no evidence of rebellion or obstruction of law so severe that it overrides state authority. And there's precedent here. In 2005, President George W. Bush was widely criticized for refusing to federalize the Louisiana National Guard during Hurricane Katrina. He argued that overriding the governor's authority would have triggered a constitutional crisis. Now, Trump is doing exactly that, for immigration raids and political theater.
But they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control. And by the way, Trump, he's not opposed to lawlessness and violence as long as it serves him. What more evidence do we need than January 6th?
So what's the difference between Title 10 and the Insurrection Act? Under Title 10, troops are limited. They support federal agencies, but they can't arrest people, impose curfews, or engage in crowd control. That changes under the Insurrection Act of 1807, which gives the president sweeping powers to use the military as domestic law enforcement, even against the will of a state's governor. The Insurrection Act was used in 1962 by JFK to desegregate schools in Mississippi, in 1992 by George H.W. Bush to quell riots in L.A., but with California's request. Trump hasn't invoked the Insurrection Act yet, but critics worry this Title 10 order is a trial balloon. As the Brennan Center for Justice warns, the Insurrection Act is dangerously vague and broad, and ripe for abuse in the wrong hands. So far, the only insurrection is the one Trump claimed in his post. Antifa, the open borders crowd, and fake liberal activists are trying to shut down law enforcement. I won't let them. But LAPD and the California National Guard say they've seen no credible threats of rebellion.
And before going further, I want to say a few words about the situation in Los Angeles, California. Have you heard of the place? Where I've deployed thousands of National Guard troops and hundreds of Marines to protect federal law enforcement from the attacks of a vicious and violent mob. And some of the radical left, they say, oh, that's not nice. Well, if we didn't do it, there wouldn't be a Los Angeles. It'd be burning today, just like their houses were burning a number of months ago. Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by invasion and third world lawlessness here at home, like is happening in California. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not let that happen. It's never going to happen.
Under normal circumstances, the state governor controls their National Guard, unless the president federalizes them under very specific conditions. We saw this in 2020. Governor Tim Walz deployed the Minnesota National Guard after George Floyd's murder. Trump offered federal help, but it was rejected. 1965, President Lyndon Johnson federalized the Alabama Guard to protect civil rights marchers after Governor Wallace refused. In both cases, the federal role was clear: to defend constitutional rights or assist overwhelmed states. But in this case, neither condition exists. There's no large-scale violence, and California never asked for troops. This is a political move, not a military necessity. And it's exactly the kind of power grab the Constitution was written to prevent.
Take time, reflect on this perilous moment. A president who wants to be bound by no law or constitution, perpetuating a unified assault on American traditions. This is a president who in just over 140 days has fired government watchdogs that could hold him accountable for corruption and fraud. He's declared a war on culture, on history, on science, on knowledge itself. Databases, quite literally, are vanishing. He's delegitimizing news organizations, and he's assaulting the First Amendment.
Legal scholars and veterans are warning that Trump's actions may not just be a bad precedent, they could create a constitutional crisis. According to Steve Vladeck, a constitutional law professor at Georgetown and author of One First, there's nothing these troops will be allowed to do that ICE officers couldn't do themselves. It's legally redundant and politically provocative. He continues, deploying military force domestically without necessity corrodes civil-military trust, demoralizes the troops, and raises the risk of violence escalating, not decreasing. If Trump goes further and invokes the Insurrection Act, it would give him sweeping domestic police powers right as the 2026 midterms begin ramping up. And remember, this isn't some far-off hypothetical. In June 2020, Trump already threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act during Black Lives Matter protests. This may just be his second attempt. Trump's use of Title X in Los Angeles isn't just a legal maneuver, it's a test of federal power versus state authority, a test of how far a president can push military force into domestic affairs, and a test of whether our legal system can check a president intent on blurring the lines between law enforcement and political warfare. The last time this kind of deployment happened over a governor's objection, it was about protecting civil rights. This time, it's about ICE raids and federal optics. Whether it holds up in court or collapses under scrutiny, could shape what future presidents can get away with in their own cities. So what do you think? Is this legal, smart, or dangerously authoritarian? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth breakdowns on U.S. politics and history.
Again, thanks to our law enforcement officers and the majority of Angelenos who protested peacefully, the situation was winding down and was concentrated in just a few square blocks downtown. But that's not what Donald Trump wanted. He again chose escalation. He chose more force. He chose theatrics over public safety. He federalized another 2,000 Guard members. He deployed more than 700 active U.S. Marines. These are the men and women trained for foreign combat, not domestic law enforcement. We honor their service. We honor their bravery. But we do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces. Not in LA, not in California, not anywhere. We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength.